Right, hello guys. Well, I thought it was time for me to make another little video. Let me just get rid of this from the screen. So, you thought British justice was fair. Well, it isn't. That might not come as much of a surprise to some of you. I have my own story to tell, which really hasn't been told properly, and I don't know how to begin it. Um, Basically, my name is Tony. My last name is Alexandrovic. My father was Russian, my mother English, and I was born in a town in Nelson in Lancashire in 1953. Most people call me Alex. It's a lot simpler than my surname. And in my earliest years, I was conscious of my father at home with visitors, mostly who spoke Russian, but I never thought anything of it really. But in 1971, I was arrested by the police. I was just a kid really. I was 17 years old. And the police told me that my father was connected with the Soviet Union and was passing information to them. As it happened, a few months earlier, I'd gone to the Russian embassy in London to find out where my grandparents were living. I'd been told that they'd been moved from where they used to live because the town that they lived in, Odessa, was being extended as a naval base or something, and there was no address for them. And so, in those days, there was no internet or emails or anything like that, and I decided to go to the embassy. I was only a kid. I went to the embassy and I told them that I wanted to find out, if I could, where my grandparents were so that I could write to them. And they passed me on to a chap who came out, and he said he was a counsellor, and we went outside the embassy and sat down on a bench, and he brought some sandwiches out. It was a lunch break, and he offered me one. I said no, thank you. He did ask me a few questions about where I came from, where I was born, what kind of a school I was going to, and what religion I was. Just a few innocent questions. No more than that. And he told me that he'd do his best to find out the information I wanted, and he gave me a telephone number which he wrote down on the back of my cigarette packet. And I came away. That was it. I came away. I'd gone there. I'd seen a bloke. He told me, he tried to find out for me, gave me a contact number, and I went away. That was it. But then a few months later, the police arrested me one night. And they said to me that I'd been photographed outside the Russian embassy with a man, and it was a picture of me, and he had a bag of sandwiches, and it showed him writing a number down on the back of a cigarette packet. They asked me what information was being written down. I said, well, it was just a telephone number, that's it. And it was. Now remember, I was just a kid then. I was only 17 years old. It was the height of the Cold War. But they told me they didn't believe me. They said, no. He gave you information to bring back to give to your father, didn't he? And I said, well, no. They said, you're lying. And then they said they were going to deport my father unless I put my hand up to a crime that had been committed that night. It was a burglary, and somebody had broken into a house, confronted the occupants with a knife, and committed a GBH. And they told me that it wasn't a serious crime. Don't worry about it. If you plead guilty, put your hand up to it. You'll go to prison for 3 years, and in that time we'll have found out, whether you've been telling the truth or not. And this was all in the early hours of the morning. This was about 2:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning at a police station. I had no legal representation. I was on my own across a desk where there was 2 civilian police officers. They must have known that I'd be where I was because they'd produced the photograph. So I believe I was being followed. And anyway, there was no recording done of the interview. There was nobody to witness the interview. Nobody to witness me signing a confession. Okay, so the police officers wrote out a confession and said, just put your signature there and you'll get done for it. You'll go down, you'll get 3 years, and at the end of that time, we'll know. I wasn't too bothered about this because I'd been in institutions all my life. I'd been in children's homes since I was 11, and so I didn't really mind 3 years. I knew that I'd do 2, and I was still young enough to see everything as a bit of an adventure. Crazy, I know, but I went to court, and it was the assize court held at Lancaster Castle, and this was being taken very, very seriously. I was asked how I pled. I said guilty, and I was remanded and brought back again, and this time I was taken to a place in Manchester because the assizes were being phased out and the Crown Court was taking over, and so I went to Manchester Crown Court. The same judge was there, and he gave me 2 life sentences, one for GBH and one for aggravated burglary. I was really astounded. I hadn't, in the first place, committed these offences, but I'd just been given 2 life sentences. I think the Cray twins were only given 1, I'm not sure. But in 1971, this was unheard of, and my head was reeling. I'd been given medication and was in a bit of a daze, really. I didn't really know what was going on. My family hadn't been told that I'd been arrested, and the people in the house who had been burgled had actually seen the burglar and given a description of him. 2 people had seen him, and the 2 descriptions had been given. And if those people had been in the court, they would have pointed to me and said, that's not the person who burgled us. But they were told not to go near the court. There was very little publicity about the court. It was almost held in camera, although I do believe there was a reporter there. And I was put onto category A. At that time there was only about 18 people in the whole country who were category A prisoners, and these category A prisoners were the most dangerous people in prison in the United Kingdom. And suddenly I'd been added to that list, and I was a category A prisoner. Okay, well, I got moved, and the prisons I went to started with Walton, Wakefield, Albany, Parkhurst, Strangeways, etc. I spent most of my time at Parkhurst Prison, which was on the Isle of Wight. Most people know of it. I hope most people haven't been there, or a few people have been there. I was on this little wing down here, C wing. C wing was for prisoners who were round pegs and didn't fit into the square holes, sort of thing. And the people that I were given as cell, in the next cell to me, people like Frankie Fraser. He looks a bit younger there. Of course, Reggie was in the cell next to me, and Ronnie was in the cell opposite me. I also met other category of prisoners. This was Bruce Reynolds. He's quite a nice bloke. And these were the people that I had to walk around the exercise yard with when I was let out of my cell. So we'd get half an hour walking around here, maybe 2 or 3 of us, and we'd all be cat men. And there'd be screws with dogs. And if any of us tried to escape, we could be shot. Anyway, by the by, I was in that situation, a ludicrous situation, one that initially terrified me until I became used to the system. But I was growing up in the system. My natural development as a human being had stopped. I wasn't able to do the things that I could as a free man. And the prison authorities just locked me away and threw away the key, basically. I was still there after 10 years. I was still there after 20 years. After I'd been in prison for 23 years, the public got to find out about it, and there was a campaign to get me out. And in July, I think, of 1993, at the age of 40, I was let out of prison. Still a life sentence prisoner, and I'm still a life sentence prisoner. I was innocent. While I was in prison, I met other people. I met these chaps who were in prison for the Birmingham pub bombing and were innocent. Another person I knew quite well was Stefan Kisko. He was in prison 16 years, completely innocent. I knew of many other prisoners as well who were innocent. While I was in Parkhurst, the prison doctor was always feeding us with experimental medication, and this became known as the liquid cosh in the early 70s. This is where the term came from, and it turned us into zombies basically, and I was a zombie, no doubt about that. I didn't know where I was, and as the years went on, those medications continued, and I was mainly treated as a human guinea pig. I had no family, really, who came to see me, no visitors, and they could do what they wanted with me. As an innocent prisoner, because I was pleading my innocence and refused to admit that I'd committed this GBH burglary. I was never a burglar. I want to put that straight. I have done some things in my childhood while running away from children's homes and things like that that I'm ashamed of, really. When you're in need, the things that you have to do. So I'd nick a packet of biscuits out of a shop or borrow chocolate out of a shop. Occasionally I broke into a house, and that's what I'm really ashamed of, because I invaded other people's privacy. I understand now. But at the time, I was being treated very badly myself. And that was part of the reason why I was in a children's home. When I came out of prison in 1993, I was still age 17. I hadn't developed, as I've said, as a ordinary person. I was totally institutionalised, and I was totally paranoid about the world outside. It had changed so much, and crossing the road, and also I carried with me a post-traumatic stress disorder, which I still have, because of all the things I saw in prison that were pretty evil, to be honest. And whenever I go to sleep, if I start to dream, it's usually a nightmare, and consisting of flashbacks to things that I saw, cutting somebody down who was hanging from his cell at bars, watching people getting killed, watching people getting disfigured, and anyway. You can imagine being in prison for 23 years, in those prisons, Parkhurst, Dartmoor, and the kind of people that are in there, and what they would get up to. And so I was part of all that, and really battling for survival, but also with the hope that, next year or tomorrow or the day after, something will happen to show that I was innocent. The people who did commit this burglary, and as I'm sure I was being followed by the police, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure who did commit this burglary. If it was burglars, but anyway, I'm not going to go any further on that, because I can't give any evidence about it. So I came out of prison. When I came out of prison, I had a lot of press people waiting to interview me. And a documentary was made, and it was called The Curious Case of Alex, which was a curious title. Anyway, wasn't it? But I'm going to type my name now. Into the search bar and search it. Okay. This story was a large piece in The Independent, and it gives a description of my interview, the first interview I had with a police, with a reporter. So it's all there, and let me just go back. During my last 12 months in prison, I wrote down a manuscript, and this was telling about my first 12 years in prison and the kind of things that I'd come up against, etc., and the things I'd seen. And I'd called it the Prison Chronicles. Anyway, I'd come out of prison with them, and a prison governor who I'd met in prison also wrote a large manuscript, and it was added to mine, and the product of that was a book called The Longest Injustice. It can be found here if you want to find the link, although basically all you have to do is type in my name and you'll come up with a whole range of things to do with my life, my wrongful imprisonment. When I came out of prison, I was told that I was going to get an apology from the Home Office for wrongful imprisonment and compensation, and neither of these things have happened, of course, British justice being what it is. I'm 66 years old now. My memory's shot, so I don't know if I'm 66 or 67. I'm something like that anyway. And I live on my own, and I haven't been given an apology or any compensation for the life they took from me. So basically what I want to say is, don't think that the British prison system is full of guilty people. Bear in mind that there are people in prison who are innocent. I know of them. I've met them. I've learnt how to know if someone's lying or not. I've met so many con artists, literally, over the years, that I could tell if somebody's giving me a load of BS or not. And I know if somebody's telling me the truth. And most of the people that are innocent that I met are the ones who were young when they were sentenced, who had no proper legal representation. They had legal aid which provided so much money for the solicitor, but never enough money for the solicitor to conduct an examination, an investigation, to hire a proper QC or whatever. If you have money and you can afford to buy to pay for a QC, buy a QC, then you're going to get away with it, no matter what you're convicted of. But if you have to rely on legal aid, and I think that's been reduced recently, so I'm not sure about that anymore. But if you have to rely on that, you forget it, you're going to prison. I find that the police in the 1970s, and the early 1970s in particular, which is when I was stitched up, were more concerned with just getting a conviction, fitting the what they knew to the facts, coming up with the wrong answers, and a lot of people suffered through that. So that's me, and I'm still waiting, and I hope that maybe one day I'll get some redress, or maybe I'll get thrown back in prison again for actually telling people about what happened to me. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I do hope everyone's well. I wish you all the best. One little thing that I would like to say is that if you do get picked up by the police for a crime that you did not do, when you go to the police station, refuse to answer any questions. Demand to see a solicitor and demand to be given the polygraph test as you're being asked the questions. Okay? That's just to safeguard yourself and to back up what you're saying. They'll know if you're telling the truth or not. If you are telling the truth, you've got nothing to worry about, and I would recommend that. So that's the final thought. So I'm going to come out of this now. I'm running Linux 17.3, and the screen recorder I'm using I'm not used to, so I'm getting a lot of pop-ups on the screen, but I hope you've managed to cope with that. So take care, and I hope you'll follow some of my videos on my channel on YouTube. Well, there you go. It's always hard to say goodbye.